Tarot cards have fascinated me for a long time, at least since I was a teenager. This is the first deck of cards that I ever bought back then in Italy, Shakespeare-inspired tarot. I remember saving my allowance as a young teenager to buy this deck of cards. And they are a thing of beauty. In a future video I want to show them to you. But as I say, to this day this deck is one of my most treasured possessions. I feel very emotionally attached to them. But why do I like tarot cards? Why you may like them in case you don't use them yet. You don't have your own little collection. Artistically, I think tarot cards are just beautiful. There is something about the art, the visual grammar that just is very appealing. And of course, there is a huge variety of tarot decks out there. Some are more attractive, some less than others, but simply as a form of artistic consumption, to me, a tarot deck is a perfectly legitimate thing to add to your collection and simply to use as a means of entertainment. Sometimes I open one of my tarot decks and I simply go through the cards, or then I shuffle them and then I look at them, at the art in the random order in which they come. The fact that it's a collection of small works of art, if the tarot deck is nice enough that you can shuffle, that pretty much you can use to create your own unique random exhibit every time that you want to take off the shelf, to me that's already very, very powerful. Of course, you can also play games with tarot decks. That's the original purpose why tarots came to be. As far as we know, around the 15th century, late 15th century in Italy, northern Italy, the courts of the time started playing with these cards, courtiers at the time, which incidentally, just as a side note, today there is this stigma of adults playing games, so they must be, nerds and live in their mother's basement or whatever other offensive stereotype you want to think of. In the Renaissance, adults play card games, and they play other games that I'll mention later, were the most sophisticated, the most educated, the most respected, the most envied, the most influential people in Europe at the time. It was a very prestigious hobby to have. And so at the time they used a tarot deck to play trick-taking type games, which you can still do with a tarot deck. Go on Board Game Geek, you will also find a lot of other system of rules that you can use to play different games. And then also, of course, is the symbology of the tarot that adds so much to the experience of playing, of doing stuff with the tarots. And that's also something I like very much, since we don't play the tarot decks, tarot cards necessarily according to the rules that they have been used with and designed for originally. Then it becomes a tool for our imagination, a tool that we can use in a lot of different things. And again, actually going back to the Renaissance, both uses were known, the trick-taking game that you could play with the cards and the imaginative game. We have several writers at the time that talk about the fact that the courtiers would distribute the cards, you will have your hand of cards, and then they would use these cards with this beautiful imagery and art as part of a storytelling game, as a conversation tool. In order to add to the conversation, you would play a card and wave the symbology of the card into what you were saying. You were pretending to be a character from the card. These were early role-playing games. Sometimes you would place a spread of cards on the table randomly and then improvise a poem, improvise a discourse. So they were engines to generate narratives, which to me is fascinating. And this is also something that you can still do. You can still incorporate tarot decks in role-playing games. So role-playing games, actually, they've been designed around the idea of using cards to generate events. And in general, if you have a beautiful, artistically satisfying deck of cards, you can probably integrate it in your role-playing game campaign. I did that in the past. I used this very deck in a Pathfinder campaign that I was leading as the game master. At some point, the characters found a tarot deck, which, what a coincidence, corresponded to this tarot deck that my players, actual players, were using. And so from time to time, they would get a spread of cards on the table, to try to read the future. And then as the game master, since I know what's in store, I know what is in the future, I would try to give them hints and clues about a certain character, the menacing woman, that strange guy, that trap, the tower. Maybe it's a place where there is a treasure, that kind of stuff. So that just added a very interesting, very fascinating layer to the experience. And you can do so too if you're a game master, if you incorporate a deck of cards. It may be something that your characters are using, and of course the players also playing with. It may be a way of generating random events for your campaign. I think there is an untapped potential for inclusion of tarot cards in fantasy role-playing games. It has been done before, but I think more can be done. Some people also use tarot decks for divination, to learn about the future, etc., etc. I don't, and I personally, that's my personal belief or lack thereof, I do not believe that if you place a certain drawing and a certain palette of colors on a piece of cardboard, then the piece of cardboard magically can read the future, can tell you what's going to happen, can tell you whether you're going to win the lottery or whether you'll find a significant other. To me, that is simply absurd. However, I understand the fascination why people have been using tarot decks in the past to do so, because I do believe that tarots have a psychological effect, which is a quasi-divination effect. Just like if you look at the Rorschach inkblot, there isn't a specific content there, and it will not tell you much about what the inkblot has or represents, but about what you see. What you see in those inkblots will tell you something about yourself, because you saw that meaning, you made that connection. Different people looking at the same cloud will come up with different interpretations. They will see different things, and that will not tell us anything about the cloud, but may tell us a lot about the person. So I don't believe that there's anything magic in tarot decks. I do believe that it can be a powerful way to gain insight, self-insight. And again, I believe mainly you have to explore yourself. Some people can read it for you, and they're kind of like pulling out whatever it is that you have in your mind, that you see in the tarot. They kind of pull it out, they can help you give it shape. But then this has also been done throughout history for predatory purposes, so I'm always suspicious of that. But I am completely in favor. Get your tarot deck, one that feels right to you, that appeals to you. And again, the fact that you select a deck rather than another maybe already says something about you. And then put some cards out there. There are different configurations. You choose the one that you want, and start seeing things, start reading the symbols. Again, the truth is not in the symbols, is in your mind. I don't think the tarot deck can tell you if you'll meet a significant other, but may help you figure out if you're ready personally to commit to a relationship with a significant other. It will not tell you whether or not you win the lottery, but it may tell you why you are worrying about your financial situation. So I do believe that they are powerful psychological tools precisely because they have a rich symbology whose meaning is unclear, or in any case has so many possible meanings. So my personal opinion, if you're also interested in tarot, forget about those books that tell you how to read the tarots. Look for a deck of tarots that you like and start playing with it. This being said, that was a long intro about pretty much why I like tarot decks and why they're so fascinating to me, and why I have a small collection. And then in the rest of this video, I want to show you some tarot decks. In particular, I want to show you 3 fantasy decks, precisely building on this idea that I believe that you can incorporate tarot decks in fantasy games, and they can become a really interesting prop, especially if we're talking about role-playing games. So I'm going to show you 3 fantasy decks from my collection, as a possible suggestion on things that you may want to incorporate. And so, without further ado, let's take a closer look at these decks that I selected for you. The decks that I want to show you today are the Dragon Tarot deck, the Fantastical Creatures Tarot, and the Tarot of Dreams. I selected them because of their fantasy theme and because I think they can be integrated particularly easily into a campaign of Dungeons and Dragons, fantasy games, into storytelling games, because they have very rich imagery, very nice illustrations, again, full of symbology, that for some has some magic powers. To me, the beauty of that symbology is that doesn't necessarily mean anything specific, so I can see whatever I want in it. Here you have a quick reference of the major and minor arcana. The cards are in order, so you get a good sense of the deck. And we start with the major arcana. The Fool, always one of the most fascinating cards in any tarot deck. The Pilgrim, the Wanderer. Here we have the Magician, the High Priestess, the Empress. So this is Fantastic Creatures. You can see some are recognizable, like a Pegasus, some not so much. You will need to look at, I guess this is the Rock. You will need to look at the Lovers, the booklet that comes with the deck to know exactly what these are. This makes me think of the Platonic myth of the chariot with the 2 horses, although this is 2 centaurs. Strength, the Hermit, the Wheel of Fortune. This is an unusual interpretation of the Wheel of Fortune, if nothing else because I can barely see the wheel. There's a sense of stability with the Sphinx here that usually I don't associate with the card of the Wheel of Fortune. The Hangman, this is a very unusual representation, if nothing else, because I don't see anybody hanging here or a man. I see an angelic Medusa. So, well, again, get your imagination to work. Death. I'm used to decks where death is not named. It's an old tradition in some decks, but in English-speaking countries it's very common actually to have the card called Death named. I guess it's sort of like an old European superstition. We don't name the thing. Incidentally, death doesn't necessarily mean death. When you're doing your own readings, it may mean change. If it's a death of a bad situation, then it's good for you. A bad trait in you is died, an old you is dead, and now a new you is here. So that simply means change, regeneration, or at least that's how I read it. Because you can do whatever you want with the tarot card. Temperance, chains, vaguely Game of Thrones, don't you think? The Tower. I can think of Game of Thrones. Well, is there anybody out there that still doesn't know what happened to the House of the Starks and the Tide? So, maybe it's not a spoiler, but it makes me think of Winterfell. The Star, the Moon, I like the idea of the Unicorn. The Sun, again, I think that the majesty of the symbol of the sun is well captured. Judgment, I don't know what that is. And the World. Again, this is, I don't, it's very mysterious, and that's kind of the point. I don't want to show you every card, or maybe I'll go like quickly. At least some of the cups, as you can imagine. There is water symbology connected to the cups, and that makes sense. I'm going a little faster this way. If you want to see more in detail, you can just pause the video. So pretty much merfolks are the theme of the cups. As for the swords, we have various types again of fantastical creatures and monsters. There seems to be more variety as long as the monster creature has a sword somewhere. It works. I also see some Asian motifs. Definitely a nice variety of illustrations and of different styles even. The wands, as you can imagine, there's a little bit of Midsummer's Night Dream. Because this idea of like wands has to do with trees, with nature, forests. The occasional harpy. And pentacles. In many decks, pentacles are called coins, especially in traditional tarot decks that are used to actually play games. And other decks are called pentacles, and here they went the mystical way, and so pentacles it is, and I kind of think it's appropriate. Fantastical creatures. Again, it worked very well. In your fantasy campaign, the circle, the pentacle to summon monsters and demons, etc., etc. And then we're back to the original arcana. Now, as for the Dragon Tarot, comes with a small booklet. And I could tell you, I like the dragon deck. My problem is the illustrations are a little samey. They look very similar. I think it's a challenge if you want to do a whole deck with over 70 cards just with variations of the dragon. But that has the challenge that the author has decided to take on, and I don't think that the result is entirely successful. Meaning, I like this card. I just don't know what the connection is with the High Priestess. I like this card. I don't know why this is the Empress and this is the Emperor and this is the Hierophant. The Lovers, I can tell. So dragons. The Chariot, again, but Strength. It's just that when it comes to the Arcana Major, to the Major Arcana, you can still see the connection with the symbol in most cases. When we come to the other cards, sometimes the connection is unclear. And again, while I like each and every one of these cards individually, I think the art is very nice. I like the color palette. I like the shapes, which are vaguely surreal, almost like we're not looking at dragons, but we're having a dream about a dragon. Now, I do like the fact that here the coins are called coins and they're turned into mazes. But again, with the exception of that, I don't see that there is much difference between one and the others. And I've said the impression that this dragon could go here and this other dragon could go here and there wouldn't be much of a difference. And while the color palette is nice, it can get a little repetitive. I would have preferred nuances, variations on the theme mainly. And I'm not going to show you every card in this deck because, again, there isn't as much visual variety. I did not expect thematic variety. It's a dragon tarot, but I expect it somehow to be a little more visually stimulating. Again, I like some touches here that they are the ones associated with fire, so they're torches. But the dragons, the symbols don't seem as salient as they could be. On the other hand, if you're playing Dungeons & Dragons, if you're playing any story that has to do with dragons, well, then, boom, draw a card and you have not just an enemy, but the whole story, a whole little episode, a side quest, if you can weave that into your story, into your adventure. Now, I left for last the Tarot of Dreams of Ciro Marchetti. As you can see, these are a larger box. It comes with a very thick not rule book, but reference book. There was a lot of thinking that went into the symbology here. And oopsie daisy. As you can see, these are large cards. They are in fact larger than the other tarot cards that you saw earlier, as you can see. And full of symbology. Look, we have Hebrew letters, we have mystical symbols. This is really, there is a whole storytelling game just in here. You'll see also there are a lot of naked people, so you can have a storytelling game which is a little bit of a surreal sense, and then you have some pulpy type of adventures with some naked barbarians, that kind of stuff. But look at these. I mean, this, again, each is a microcosm. Each has so much symbology. Let me let you have a closer look at some of these cards. Fate, this is an unusual way of calling the card. This card is called the Hierophant. In many decks is the idea of like the symbol that gives you access to sacred things. In some decks it's called the Pope. But of course, not everybody agrees that the Pope has that role. Lovers, again, it gets from the very mystical to the more realistic, more pulp type of thing. I mean, I can imagine, like a king storming here, and this is the princess, and the guy is sent to exile, and adventures come from that. Strength, very beautiful. Hermit, very atmospheric. The wheel, now I can see the wheel here. Vaguely steampunky. What I like about this deck is that it doesn't have a single area of reference. Some are more steampunky, some are more classic sci-fi, again, sort of like barbarian, naked barbarian type of things. Some are more almost new agey. Some, I could see this as a vision from in a Lovecraft story. Somebody has a vision of this palace in a different world. Again, some are new agey, some are classic fantasy. I told you about, the barbarian. So it just goes from the pulpy to the mystical. And this is just, I don't know, this is just an hallucination that represents this. This is the Two of Wands. Now, as you can see, when I told you about the dragons, here you can see the wands that define the suit and the number, plus a rich symbology that you can interpret any way you want. With the dragons, you could, of course, tell the suit and the number of symbols in that suit, but there wasn't as much to stimulate the imagination. And again, here you see there is a color palette. I mean, at a glance, you can see the connection between the wands and the fire, but within that range of warm colors, there's just more variety. This is definitely, I can tell you already, an excellent deck. Also, for the feel, the quality of the images. That's a little quicker, so we don't stay here all day. I just want to make sure, you don't. Wow, look at this one. I just want to make sure you get a good sense of the deck, even if I don't show you necessarily every single one. The cups. Again, look at the variety within the cups. The palace. Oh, this is interesting. The palace. Yeah, this is a new. This is a type of card. There are 4 cards representing the palace, one for each of the suits. The simply not in traditional decks. The author was like, why don't I create an environment, a setting for the stories that take place in the player, in the reader's mind when they use these cards. The tarots are all about the characters, about items, but it's true they're not so much about places, with the exception of the tower from the major arcana. I like this. I mean, it's just ready for inclusion in your role-playing game. Underwater, cities. Where is that? Let me show you another of these palaces. And that's just, and that's the freedom you can have when you're playing with symbologies without worrying about, is it the right symbology, but rather, is the symbology interesting enough? Is it rich enough? Does it suggest enough ideas, dreams, visions, inspiration? And the coins, very nice. This time green is the connecting color. Look at the palace of coins. And also, again, a card that is not in the traditional deck, and the author was like, why don't I put it? And it does have, yes, this nice sense of, the all knowledge connected together, on top of being very visually interesting. What does it mean? It means exactly what you want it to mean, and that is the beauty of the tarot deck. So the Tarot of Dreams is almost like different styles, almost like different decks, from naked barbarians to dreams of a separate reality from Lovecraft to other symbology, but very beautiful, very rich deck, rich in visual texture, symbology. The quality of the cards is also very high. In general, these are very good tarot decks from the tactile point of view. They're nice, sturdy, durable, nice colors. This one, again, it's a little limited because of the limited symbology. This one has a lot of thematic elements to go for it. True Marchetti's Tarot of Dream is, of this small selection of fantasy decks, my favorite one, but they're all very good decks. I hope you enjoyed this video, which is, yes, different from most of my videos in the past. And if there is interest, I'm probably going to film more videos in the future, selecting other sets of tarot decks. For example, probably the next one will be literary tarot, like tarot decks inspired by literary works. Again, something that you can easily rework into your storytelling games. Thank you for watching, and to the next time.